Hi everybody and welcome back, sort of back for our class anyway. Been interesting times, a couple of interesting weeks, and they're going to get even more interesting. I hope everybody is staying calm, doing what they're supposed to do to protect everybody else, and taking good note of how things are going in this coronavirus crisis and pandemic, because in your lifetime you will probably see more of these, and use it as a learning experience. Watch how people react, watch how markets react, watch how political and medical and first responders react, and use that as a learning experience for the ones that you'll come across in your career. With that, we're going to talk about video surveillance, though. We're going to stay on track. And last week we just talked about cameras and camera types. And this week we're going to talk about how we apply them. Now, I'm not going to tell you, well, in this arena you will use this type of camera, because what I want to do is just tell you what types of things you need to consider. And from that, you can look at a list of available cameras from any vendor. And we decided we're going to use Axis for our project. But again, I want to make sure everybody understands I'm not endorsing one over the other. I just can't, be an expert in every type of camera that's out there. So we just settled on that one brand that we'll choose from. And in the future, in your practice, you can choose whichever vendor you want to choose. We need to understand how to apply them, what the factors are when you come to applying a certain type of camera, or how you're going to mount it, or how you're going to power it, and those things. So that's what we're going to go into this week. Let's do a quick recap, though, of what we talked about last week. So we know a lot of things that we didn't know before. We know the difference between a CCTV and a VSS system. CCTV, closed circuit TV, is the old style with a dedicated backbone of wires and cables that connects to each other, and it's self-contained. You can't access it from the outside. You need to be at the site where the camera and the recording device are to look at it, and nobody can tap into it from the outside. A VSS, a video surveillance system, is a network system that can be accessed remotely, can be accessed away from the site, and gives you a lot more versatility when it comes to monitoring it and maintaining it. We talked about the evolution of cameras and recording devices. We talked about the original old film in the camera, the silver-coated film. We talked about VCRs and then the multiplexer, which allowed VCRs to record more than one camera on one loop of film. We talked about the basic schematics and layouts of systems over time. We had the cameras with the film in them. We had the cameras with one VCR per camera. We had the VCR with a multiplexer in the camera. And then we went eventually to onboard recording. We talked about the importance of task and purpose, and we're going to go over that a couple more times, so make sure you understand that. Decision points for pan, tilt, zoom versus fixed cameras. Pan, tilt, zoom, although it's fancier and it has a lot more moving parts and it's fun to play with, quite frankly, and move on a joystick and move the camera around and zoom in, is not always your best choice because it may not be in the right place at the right time. So you pick your camera based on your task and purpose. If your task and purpose is to look at a particular area because that is where things are being stolen from, you wouldn't necessarily want a pan, tilt, zoom because you could be looking the other way. And then we talked about the impact of lighting and weather and other factors on cameras, and we'll go over those again because they have a lot to do with the application. But now that we know that, we're ready to start putting the cameras and devices into use. So picking the right camera really comes down to just a few things. Task and purpose being the most important. What do you want to see and why do you want to see it? If you can figure that out, you're more than halfway in the battle. Then you're going to look at your environment. Where's the camera going to go? You're going to look at power sources. There are different ways to power cameras, and that's pretty important, actually. The transmission source. Are you going to wire the camera or are you going to use wireless transmission? The practicality of the location. You may have a place you want to mount a camera, but the camera may not be very favorable in that particular location, and you may need to move it. So there's some practicality here to talk about. And then mounting hardware, really important, especially when it comes to the cost of ownership, which we'll describe in just a bit. So task and purpose, the number one most important piece of the puzzle. I keep saying that, and you got a quiz coming up this week. I would hope that you will understand task and purpose, and if you don't, you will call me because it's really important. And in fact, in your final project, when we talk about cameras, I want to see a chart of task and purpose on every camera that you spec into your final design. So the first thing really is the task. What does the camera need to see? What's the field of view, right? So if indeed the camera is trying to capture people driving into a grounds, right? You have your facility, you have your warehouse. Let's use our own example. And people are driving in, and you have a guardhouse perhaps out on the edge of the road where people drive in, so you can clear trucks coming in and deliveries and people coming into work. And you want to be able to see the guard in the guardhouse. So is your field of view the entire guardhouse and the guard? Is it the guard's face and body as they interact close up with people coming in? What does the camera need to see? Are there any barriers to the view? I mean, you may want to be able to see the guard and the guardhouse, but if you put the camera in a certain place, more than half the field is taken up with a big oak tree. And that oak tree isn't going to cause you much harm. And then worry about sunlight. When you decide about the task of a camera, what does it need to see? Remember that if you point the camera the wrong way, at least once a day, you'll be looking at a sunset or a sunrise that's going to wash out your image. That may be the time of day when you want to see it. So those types of things come into play on the task, right? What does the camera need to see? The task. Why does the camera need to see that area? So there are two different levels here, and this is something that you should remember. Classification level and identification level. And those are the two terms that are used for what you get back from your camera. So if I want classification level, then I want to be able to tell on that camera that that is a person as opposed to an animal moving across my grounds. Okay? I just want to be able to tell by classification what it is. An identification level, I want to know who that person is, or at least be able to describe them well enough so that we could identify them in a lineup later. So why wouldn't you want everything to be identification level? That makes more sense, right? Because your camera is going to get very expensive. You're going to then have issues with distance. So, if you want to be able to tell who someone is from 100 yards, you're not going to be able to tell as well from 10 yards because, cameras have a certain, focal point. So, you have to decide whether you want classification level or identification level. And there's some good reasons for classification level. Early in my military career, I was stationed with the Strategic Air Command, which is bombers and nuclear weapons. And we only concerned ourselves with classification level on cameras that were mounted around a weapons storage area. And by weapons, I mean real weapons, right? Around that weapons storage area, we were only concerned at that point. Today cameras have gotten better, but then we only needed to know classification. I was stationed in a place where there were lots of deer. I needed to know whether it was a deer or a person coming up toward that fence line. And the reason I didn't really need identification was that it was a use of deadly force authorized area, right? So if somebody was walking up to that fence line, they had already been pre-warned that they would be shot. So it really didn't matter. I didn't need to be able to identify that person on the camera. Now, let's be practical here. We weren't just going to go ahead and pick them off from a distance. I know there's some military folks in the class that probably snickered at that, right? Use of deadly force is authorized, but you darn well better do it right. We just needed to know if it was a person, so we needed to know how to react. If it was just a deer, then we would probably not get a ground drop sensor, which was the type of alarm system we were using back then. And I can share this now because this has been 30 plus years and that is no longer in use. But you have to decide why the camera needs to be there. Are you trying to get license plate numbers? Are you trying to get faces? Or are you trying to get models and makes of cars and see which direction they go when they drive out of the guardhouse? You can't necessarily get it all. So you've got to determine what your purpose is. Task, what does the camera need to see? What's the camera going to do? It's going to look this way and take in this field of view. Why is it doing that? Because I want to see faces and license plates, or I want to see direction of travel, or I just want classification level of anybody walking up to my fence line on the outside, or I want identification level on cameras on the inside so I can tell who just walked into the file room, right? So you need to determine your task and purpose. Again, if you have trouble with that, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to explain it 1,000 times over, give you all kinds of examples, work with you on it, but it's hugely important you understand task and purpose. So the second thing you should concern yourself with is the environment. Where is this camera going to go? So we talked last week about inside or outside. That's pretty easy. I mean, you don't use an inside camera outside, even if it's in a protected overhang, even if there's a carport. You always use an outdoor camera because the wind blows, right? Stuff happens. The height. So the distance and the height are two things that you need to concern yourself with. If you use a fisheye lens and you're using it on the side of a building and you're up 2 stories, you're going to have a problem because you're going to take in so much data. You're going to have such a wide angle that none of the data is going to make much sense. Even when you flatten it out with your software so it looks like a regular panorama picture, it's just not going to fit very well. So height and distance, and when I say height, generally when you want to go a farther distance, you go up higher, right? If you want to see farther, you go to your high spots, right, to look for it. You get up on the ladder and look, a farther distance. That's how life works, right? So height and distance matter. That's the environment you have to concern yourself with. Lighting. If you put the camera, let's say we're going to look at a guard shack, and the guard is there, and he's checking IDs and talking to people and screening them as they come in. And generally, that's a really well-lit area at night. And if you have your camera very close and you're pointed right near the floodlight, you're going to get a big halo on that camera. So is there a better angle, right? Is the environment lighting-wise conducive to getting your best picture? Generally, if you don't have enough light, you can use infrared. Remember, we looked at infrared lights that come on the camera. They look like little LEDs that go around the lens, and that will help you out tremendously. But if you need lighting for another purpose, is it going to give you too much? And is it going to distort your picture? Domed versus open lens. The environment. Do you want someone to see which way the camera is pointed? In a smoked dome camera, it can be very difficult to see, and especially if the camera is up at a decent height where you really can't see too well into it, it's very hard to see which way the lens is pointed, even in a fixed camera in a dome. Whereas if you have a bullet camera and it's pointed in one direction, everybody knows where it's going. So in that environment, do you want people to know exactly what you're looking at, or do you not? And then the climate. And climate is not weather. Climate is not, is it raining? But climate is the area, as you know, that you live in. The climate in western Pennsylvania is snowy in the winter and hot and a little bit humid in the summer. And the fall, as far as I'm concerned, the spring, it's one of the most gorgeous places in the world to live. And I have spent some time in western Pennsylvania. Not from there, as you know, but it is just gorgeous. It is like northern Michigan. Great place to be in the spring and in the fall. And then you have the freeze your butt off season, and you have your bake off where you can't go outside because it's so hot and sticky. But the climate is something you have to worry about. And got a little horror story for you, and it has to do with my friend Ben Franklin, who I'm sure you've all heard of and know about his one theory that we're going to talk about. So Ben Franklin told us you don't put something at a height and connect metal to it in a lightning storm because you look like our friend here. And so we all learned that. But where do we put our cameras sometimes? Well, we put them up very high on top of things because we want to see a long distance. And if you want to see a long distance, one of the things you want to do is get higher. So, horror story for you. I used cameras one time at a farm environment. It was a research farm. Animal health products, making vaccines and the like for farm animals. And it was a regular working farm, and they had 2 tall silos, just like you see on a regular farm. And I looked at those and I was like, yum, yum, great place to put a camera. I can see the whole, 1,000 acres around it if I go up on top of that silo. And I put cameras on top of the silo. And 2 things happened. Number one, I learned, and some of you farmers may know this, that silage, stuff that goes in the silo, the grain, creates heat. It's constantly breaking down, so it creates heat. So in the top of a silo, you have a fair amount of steam. So the first thing I learned was, well, heck, I've got an obstructed view because the domes on my cameras were constantly fogging up, even with the heaters going on them, because it was on the outside. It was condensation on the outside. Terrible thing. About 2 weeks after I had those, trying to figure that question out, a lightning storm came in, and I had a camera that was looking at, the 2 cameras were looking at each other. They were pan, tilt, zoom. They just happened to be looking at each other, and I got a view much like you see on the screen right now. I watched my one camera get absolutely fragged, and it just didn't short the thing out. I mean, it basically exploded. It was kind of cool, but very expensive. So think about the climate. If you are in a high lightning area, think about how you might want to talk about where you want to put that camera as not the highest point. So first, before we talk about power source, let me apologize for the barking dogs. As most of you know, people are sequestered in their homes, and many of them want to get out and get a little fresh air. I live in a suburban area, so there's a fair number of neighbors who want to go out for a walk And my dogs honestly believe that the roadway around my home belongs to me and no one else, and no one else has a right to walk on that road, because especially the bigger of the two little dogs, Dr. Diesel, believes that that road is his, and so he wants to let everybody know to get off his road. And then Dr. Daisy, his associate, barks. She has no idea why she's barking, but it's the thing to do, because if one barks, both do. So I'm going to apologize ahead of time. We're all working from home now, so these things are going to happen. Learn to deal with it. You're going to hear it on other recordings from other professors as well, I'm sure, or phones will ring or people will talk in the background. So, power sources. You can hardwire your camera, right? You can just run a power cord to it, but never, ever, ever plug it in. If you plug in a camera, someone can unplug the camera. And I can't tell you how many cameras I see when I walk around, especially in retail, that you look and you see the thing just goes into an outlet. And if I want to shut the camera off, I just unplug it. So, if I unplug it, it's going to take somebody X amount of time to get back there to plug that camera in. Then the camera normally needs to reboot. It's got to warm up a little bit, right? Most cameras are not immediate. They've got to reconnect. So you're going to have an automatic downtime anytime somebody unplugs that camera. And I used a surveillance camera one time that I actually drilled a hole in the ceiling and put a little pin camera through the top. I was looking for somebody tampering with a piece of equipment. Hooked it to a NetVR. Actually, it was a DVR at the time. And plugged it in. It was up in a catwalk above a ceiling. So now we're in an industrial area above the ceiling, up in an area where there's walkways and it's piping and all that sort of stuff, right? I'm up in the ceiling of an industrial building, running this, plugged it in, and came back the next day. The equipment had been tampered with. So I checked my trap. I was like, yes, the equipment's been tampered with. I know I got it on film. I go upstairs and someone had unplugged it because they wanted to plug in a power drill to work on something in the ceiling. Anytime you have a camera, don't just plug it into the wall. Make sure it's hardwired. Or modern cameras are power over Ethernet. So, your Ethernet cable that you would use if you were plugging in your computer to an actual jack rather than using it wirelessly. You can use the power, because cameras require only a small amount of power now. They don't run off 120 anymore, really. And you can get your signal and data over a single connection. If you don't want to do that, you can actually use a PoE or a power over Ethernet injector, which is essentially an adapter, a transformer that takes the same type of cable and plugs it in, and then you basically wire that back and it steps the power down. So hardwired, never plugged in. Power over Ethernet, which plugs into the camera but not in a way that people can get to it, right? Or a PoE injector. If you're not going to use the Ethernet to actually send your signal, you can use a wireless camera, let's say, but you need to get power to it. You can use a PoE injector, which is a pretty cheap piece of equipment that essentially steps the power down from the regular power source to what you need to run the camera. Those are your power source choices, but you need to make those because it has a lot to do with where you put the camera, because there's not power every place you want to put a camera. So just like a power source, you have to think about the transmission source. How are you going to get the signal back? So as I just said, not every place you want to put a camera has power. I would love to put a camera out in the woods behind my house to watch deer, right? And if I do that, though, I am not going to run electrical power out there. I'm going to have one that runs off battery or solar, right? And I'm going to have it self-contained, because I'm not going to run Ethernet to run the signal back to my house. So it would be a wireless camera. So the transmission source matters. Wired is your best bet, okay? It's normally a network connection these days, but it could be done with coax cable, which is the type of cable that you use on the back of your television to connect it to your cable box, if you still have a cable box, right? Or a twisted pair of wires. There are devices you just use a pair of just regular copper wire. You need two, and you connect it to this device, and it basically sends it the signal over the twisted pair. It's old school, but let me tell you what, it's still used in a lot of places. Camera systems, just like access control systems, once you put them in, you don't change them very often. They're not something that you put in a new one every year. You'll put in one, it'll last 10 years or more. And if your system, when you get to your first job, is running off a coax, that's what you'll have. If it's running off a twisted pair, that's what you'll have until you change it with a project somewhere with a driver to do it, right? So understand that wired systems are very, very, very common, but wireless are becoming more common. The Ring doorbell is a wireless camera setup, right? It's just going back to your router. Wireless seems a lot easier because you don't have to run it, but think about bandwidth. Cameras use a lot of bandwidth. You're using your Ring doorbell on your router. You're not sharing that with anybody really until you get out into the actual internet, right, where everything is, excuse me, comes together. When you use the wireless system for a camera in your business, you're sharing that network with everybody else. They're trying to use it to manufacture things or do research or to sell products, to contact customers. They're trying to have Skype and Zoom and WebEx meetings, and then you're going to use the bandwidth for your security cameras. You may very well be disappointed in what you get as far as quality. So you need to determine bandwidth. It's a discussion you have with your IT folks, business technology, and information technology, digital, whatever the title at your particular company. Have that discussion about bandwidth, because if you decide on wireless cameras because they're easy, you might get disappointed. So transmission source is the other thing you want to think about. Practicality of location. So you find a place you want to put a camera. You know what your task and purpose is. So you say, well, that's the best place to put my camera if I want to look at this particular view, and if my purpose is to capture this particular function or activity. So this is the place I should put my camera. But think about traffic. Will it impede your purpose? When I say traffic, I mean people. I mean movement of anything. I put up cameras in a hallway where I didn't realize that 2 or 3 hours out of the day there was movement of these tall metal racks. And they were constant. And there was constantly people moving racks. And then they would stop in the hallway. And they would stage them in front of my cameras for an hour at a time. And I could see nothing go by. So you have to think about it. You need to do a bit of a survey of where you want to put a camera normally. And think about the types of things that will move. So for our particular project, perhaps you want to put cameras by the, on the corner back where the delivery trucks are going to be, right? But do you want to put it in an area where one truck comes in that's taller than the rest and it blocks the camera and you can't see anything? So you got to think about the height. You have to think about, what's the practicality of putting a camera in a particular location? Is there a fair chance of damage or vandalism? Cameras get vandalized, especially on the outside of a building, right? Cameras get damaged. People are in a work environment to work. They move things around. There's things that may be tall enough to hit the bottom of a camera. Those racks, for instance, could hit the camera. So think about, is the location protected from what you're going to do? In a warehouse situation, if you decide, look, I'm going to put cameras so they look down the individual, sections of the warehouse, well, that's great until a forklift rips that bad boy off the wall and snaps the wiring on it, and now you have wires and you're not watching anything. So think about the potential for damage. Think about how far the wiring run and power run might be. Again, that goes back to the transmission and the power to some extent, but is it practical to say, I need a camera here to watch that area 100 yards away, when if I just move the camera to the other side of the building, I could probably see just from a different angle that same spot 100 yards out, but there's power and transmission cable and everything in one location and the other one has none. So can you accomplish the same task and purpose from an easier location is really the question. Will you get deterrence benefits if that's part of your goal? So if you put a camera in one place, it may be the optimal place to put that camera and nobody can see it. And that's usually a good thing, especially in the next part. We talk about aesthetics. If no one can see it, then it doesn't ruin the look. Remember, we talked about aesthetics when we talked about bollards and planters and things. But the deterrence benefit may be something you're looking for. You may want people to see that you have cameras on your location. And so if you put the camera in a place that may be optimal from a view, but it's not seen, you might lose that deterrence. And you need to make a judgment call as to whether you want it to be seen or not. That may determine the size of the camera that you use, the type of camera that you use, even the housing type, if nothing else. So think about the practicality of the location. So now that you've gone through all that, you've kind of figured out what type of camera you may want to use, right? And I would strongly suggest, although it is up to you, that you choose the simplest camera to use. Don't try to get too fancy when it comes to cameras because things break, right? Simple is a good thing. Then you have to decide how you're going to mount that camera. And it seems like an easy thing, but there are lots of camera mounts, and there's lots of reasons to use different camera mounts. You have to think about whether the mount you use obstructs your view, and you'll see that when we talk about pole-mounted cameras in a second. And how is the camera going to be maintained? You may mount it up on the corner of your building, and you can see forever. And then on day 2, you've got a bad camera, and it goes bad, and whoops, now how am I going to get that thing down? That's a huge cost of ownership issue. Cost of ownership is something you should remember. It's not the cost of ownership for a camera and for any electronic system is not just the purchase price, but how much does it cost to maintain that? So I noticed in the midterm projects, a lot of you used lasers, and lasers are really good for alarms. I mean, they're really cool. But if one gets out of line, you're going to have somebody in to realign it. And since you'd have to keep them low to the ground in a warehouse environment, they are going to get hit. They are going to get hit by forklifts and people walking and swinging boxes and moving things. The cost of ownership then on that laser is going to be a problem for you because you're constantly going to be getting them fixed. I can tell you that I've been in a number of warehouses that have beams that go across the back of the warehouse. They go on all 4 walls essentially. For at night, you turn them on, and it's either a microwave or a laser, infrared type beam of some kind, where there's a receiver down at the other end, and the two of them, it's just like your garage door opener, right? You'll line up the 2 little beams, and if somebody breaks the beam, it goes off. And I can tell you that they seldom are hooked up because they were so hard to maintain because of the distance between them, keeping them aligned, and people running into them with things, tripping over them, all kinds of things, because they get in corners. Even the janitor trying to sweep the cobwebs, because warehouses need to be especially clean, right? That's your finished product. They were hitting them with brooms and knocked them out. So cost of ownership is something that you're going to need to consider, and camera mounts are one of your best friends. And then how will it look? Again, deterrence, aesthetics, that balance. What do you want out of that camera mount? So let's look at several types of camera mounts because you're going to need to tell me what type of mount you're going to use on what type of camera again. And it's really a big decision, and almost as much as the camera itself, and you'll see why in just a second. So here's the easy one. It's a ceiling mount. Just about most of the cameras you see that are stuck to the ceiling are up there with a ceiling mount. And if you have a drop ceiling, I don't know if you know what a drop ceiling is. It's the ones with the panels. There's a metal grid. If mom and dad have ever finished the basement, there's a 95% chance they put in a drop ceiling because it's the easiest, cheapest way to go. And they put in those little panels. And when you put a camera in, you drill a hole and you put a mount just like we see here. That's the right way to do it. If you see here, it goes up. The wiring actually would go up right through. There's usually a tube here rather than just a bolt, and the wires will come out the top. And you have these little legs that come out, and it holds the camera in place securely. But I will tell you that probably half of the cameras that I see that are put into even drop ceilings, there's screws, drywall screws going into that soft drop ceiling tile. That's going to last until somebody wiggles it. There's Gorilla Glue on the ring of the camera, which pretty much means that if you decide you want to use that camera someplace else, you're out of luck because you're never going to get it separated from that soft material. It's going to pull apart, and there's going to be crumbs all over it, and it's going to be a mess. Camera installers, unfortunately, will put up cameras the easiest way that they can find. So just a word to the wise, when you do ceiling mounts, which is going to be the majority of your work with cameras, make sure that you specify that they use proper ceiling mounts, and you inspect that to make sure they've done it, because I will tell you that I have even seen nails used to put these things into ceilings, which is just bizarre to me, but there's a good example of a ceiling mount for you. So slightly different from the ceiling mount is the pendant mount, and you would use a pendant when you need to come from overhead. You want to look at a large, wide area down here. You may want to pan, tilt, zoom, or may not, depending what you want to focus on. But normally they're fixed cameras, and in this particular array, I see 1, 2, 3 cameras right here in this array. Guaranteed they're fixed, because if they were spinning around, they all could be looking at the same thing, and how embarrassing would that be when you're all looking here and the crime's going on over here. So, but the pendant mount gets you a little closer to the action. So it's a ceiling mount for a high ceiling, gets you a little closer to the action, can be pointed in any direction, and it's used to cover a really wide area normally above. So this would be potentially 30, 40 feet off the ground. And the pendants will come down, usually 8 feet is the longest I think I've seen. After that, you want to do something different. But these are good again, to cover a wide area, but remember, you're going to be looking at the top of somebody's head. So there'll be classification level from a legal standpoint. You may know who works in the area, so you can say, okay, well, look, there's Brian and there's Dave, and Dave is bald and Brian's got a full head of hair. From the top, I know which one's Dave and which one's Brian, right? But from a legal standpoint, you're not going to be able to say that's exactly who it is. So these are more for a classification level. So this is a gooseneck, and your camera would go mounted right on here, and you would strap this to a pole, and it comes out. So why would you not just strap the camera right to the pole? Why would you want a gooseneck? And I'll tell you, if you stand at this pole and put your nose against it, you're looking this direction, you put your nose on the pole, you won't see very much on the other side. But the farther you step back, the smaller that pole appears to get, and the more you see around it. So a standoff is the reason that you want a gooseneck, right? You want that distance so that you're not taking up, when you spin this camera around, you're not taking up 3/4 of your field of view with the pole in front of you. It goes back just a little bit, so you'll still, when you spin it around, you'll still have a pole in the way. You won't get a full 360, or actually it's a 360, I guess, from a flat view, from a flat plane. But you won't have as much pole in there if you have a standoff. The issue with goosenecks, especially on poles, is that you don't want to go too high. If you do, once you get above, I think it's about 17 or 18 feet, and maybe a safety major can send me a note because I'm sure there's an OSHA requirement on the height. But once you get above a certain height, you can't just use a ladder to get to these things. You need a lift, an actual powered lift or crank lift to get up to them. Those are something that most integrators that work on these systems don't have in-house. They lease them. So if you have work that requires a lift, they will lease one. So your cost of ownership just went up because you're going to pay for that. And the other thing is that they don't get them right away. So if you need this camera done in 4 hours and they can't find a lift to rent for 3 days, you're waiting 3 days because that's how long it will take to get to that camera. So gooseneck is good in that it gives you the standoff on a pole. And if you don't go up too high, you're great. Go up above the required height for a lift, and your cost of ownership with this mount just went way, way up. So one of the best ways to solve for that height issue and that cost of ownership issue is a parapet mount when you get up high enough, and especially on a flat-topped building. So this is a parapet mount, and it looks a lot like a gooseneck in a lot of ways, right? You could even call it a gooseneck of sorts. The issue is that the parapet mount, when done properly, swings around. So you can work on it on the flat roof. The technician can go out. They still need, by the way, to tie off. When you're that close to the edge of a roof, you have a tie off for safety, right? But they're not hanging over the side of the building to work on this. They just unbuckle down here. There's a pin they pull out, and they swing the camera around, and they stand on the roof and they fix it, and they swing this thing back out. So parapet mounts can be your best friend if you're going up higher than, say, 20 feet, right? Again, I apologize. I'll look it up and I'll put a note out to the class. I believe for some reason it's 17 or 18 feet is the required height, where it's no longer a ladder job. It's a lift job, but it just gets really expensive when you get up that high. So a parapet mount can be your best friend when it comes to that, because it can be swung around and you can work on it on a flat roof. You don't put this on a building that has a peaked roof, because then your guy, even if he's swinging around, now he's hanging off a peaked roof. That's even worse in my opinion. So in that case, you would probably use some other type of mount. So what other type of mount could you use in that case? Well, when it comes to pole-mounted cameras, there are two. This one's a wind down. It's kind of hard to see, and I apologize. In fact, if I can blow this up just a little bit, you can see this is on a cable. And usually it's remote control or an electric panel down here at the ground, or a crank. And you basically just crank the camera down, and you work on it, and you crank it back up. It's on a cable, and it's got pins or some sort of connector, so the wiring doesn't come down with it. It just goes and clips right up in there, right? That's a great idea, but I will tell you that they've kind of fallen out of favor. They really didn't work as well as you would think. The cables would kind of get jammed up. If you were raising it back up, they didn't seat as well as they should have in the housing. And so the wind downs, you'll still find them, and they're kind of cool. I mean, they're a great idea as opposed to having to have someone get on a lift, get to the top of the pole. But the hinged pole has become the better option. And as you see with this pole, it will stand up straight, and this little tongue slides in and locks in place. And then you unlock it, and you lift it up. The camera's up here, and you just drop the camera down to the ground. You need a little more clearance. Here you just drop it down, several feet off of the pole. It's on a bit of a gooseneck up there, right? And it comes down 3 or 4 feet from the pole. This one you're going to need, in a parking lot, you would need to move some cars so you could drop it down. But much, much easier. That hinge point is just a simple hinge, as opposed to cabling, which can jam and have to worry about whether it seats or not. You get everything done on the ground, and then you just push it right back up. And it's usually a one-man job on these types of poles. These poles can be expensive. I just priced some out to use in Europe somewhere. I think the U.S. equivalent was about $5,000 per pole, where a standard light pole in the parking lot of the same height would have run about $1,500, I think. So they can be rather expensive, but again, they pay for themselves over the lifetime because you don't have to get the lift, and you can fix your cameras right away. You don't have to wait for a lift or wait to bring them down and take a look. And then I just found this panoramic view, which I thought was kind of cool. I'm not quite sure, though, what you gain. If the pole were straight and you had a gooseneck off of it, you would still have, this is still going to be in your way, right? When you spin around, you're still going to have this in the way. I guess if the pole were straight and you were goosenecked off of it a little bit, you'd have maybe a little wider. But, okay, I guess, if you're looking straight down, you still have this in the way. I'm not quite sure what it does, but I just thought it looked really cool. So, let your conscience be your guide. Maybe I'm just not looking at the right application for it. But again, camera mounts, when you look at the different mounts, you need to determine a couple things. Your height, where you're going to put the camera, whether it's inside or outside, whether the ceiling can be drilled or can't be drilled, and then the cost of ownership. It's kind of a balance. Again, things like a hinge pole and a parapet mount cost more than a straight pole and a gooseneck. But over time, in the life of a camera, the amount of times you may need to work on it, to service it once a year, just to do basic preventative maintenance, clean the lens, check the heater, make sure that make adjustments in the lenses and those types of things, change an infrared unit on it. The life of the camera, the right camera mount will save you cost of ownership every time. So we've got a camera. We've decided which camera we want to use. We've gone through all the tests, right? The practicality and the environment and the task and purpose and all those great things. And then we've chosen the right mount for that camera, right? Because we know that is the camera going to be accessible to us? Are we going to need to have it height? How high is it going to be? Can we mount it right to a pole, or is it fixed? If it's a fixed camera, you can mount it right to the pole. You don't need you could strap it right to the pole with a basic mount, because you don't have to worry about the pole. It's behind you, right? So, you made that decision now, the camera and the mount, and now you have to worry about a recorder. This is the easy part. Two choices, really, because the VCRs have kind of gone away. You may work somewhere or have worked somewhere where there's a VCR and a multiplexer and an old black and white TV under the counter. That's great, and it's better than no security at all. And I applaud people that have kept those systems working, because they have at least said, if I'm going to make an investment in it, I'm going to make it work. But you're not going to buy those today. Right? No one's going out and buy a VCR with a multiplexer to hook to a analog security camera. It doesn't work that way anymore. That stuff is antique, and in fact, you'll pay more for it because there are collectors in that stuff, believe it or not. So you'll either have a net video recorder, which is either on-premise or remote. But if you're going to use it remotely, remember, you're sucking up a lot of bandwidth. You're sending all those video signals over the internet through your own personal network first, your intranet, right? And onto the internet, and then back onto your intranet again, and to the recorder. That's sucking up a lot of bandwidth, which is pretty important to most businesses now. They really want to save that for the real business purpose, right? The selling of their products. You have to maintain hardware. The life cycle of that hardware is about 3 years. About every 3 years, you will change out your NVR units. It's just the technology is changing that fast. You'll need to change them out. You may keep them for 5. I've seen that rarely, but for the most part, they become unsupported after about 3 years. So you need to buy a new one. A standard 16 camera NVR is going to run you anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 just for a one. The memory is built into the hardware. So if you want more memory, you're going to buy more hardware, right? You're going to buy a bigger memory, bigger hard drive. You need to buy hardware for any of your needs. Does it sound like I'm saying that's a bad idea? The whole NetVR thing? What I'm saying is that technology is starting to get old. I make sure you understand it, because 99% of the workplaces you'll go into today are using that hardware and will continue to use it for a while. But understand those limitations and try to remember those limitations, because it'll help you make a business case to upgrade your camera system someday to something like onboard to cloud, which you record directly on the camera on an SD card. You push the archives. When the SD card becomes full, you can automatically push all that up to an archive and archive it in the cloud, which you basically, the viewer and the cloud, you lease from the camera manufacturer, right? It's very cheap. Storage for them is cheap because they're putting it into Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure or some cloud service. But the good thing is that updates and patches are pushed to the camera itself, and which really leads me to a discussion about camera security. So recorders, just make a choice. Do you want a piece of hardware or do you not want a piece of hardware? Do you want to maintain it or do you want to just buy the service, record on board, and send it to the cloud? That's the recommendation I would make in most cases. And there are many security professionals who would absolutely disagree with me. So, if someone else says, oh, no, you want to have a NetVR, you want to control that stuff yourself, you don't want anybody else looking at your camera stuff, well, okay. But I would say that the manufacturer of that NetVR also can get into your camera stuff. Probably your integrator has a portal to get into your camera stuff. So that theory is a little weak in my opinion. But again, my personal opinion, so take it for what it's worth, is start to lean toward onboard recording to the cloud, because that's the future. But that last part, updates and patches pushed to the camera, I want to talk about that just a little bit because it's something that's really a big issue now, and it's only going to get bigger. Cameras, recorders, any device really has a password. Every camera on your system will have a password built into it. And I will tell you that you can find the common default passwords for camera brands by going online and looking up the brand of camera and downloading the cut sheet, the owner's manual, if you will, for that camera. And it will say default password is password123 and default user is admin123. And your installer, when they put the camera in, should go in and change that. That's what they should do. They should. But they don't normally, unless you direct them to do that. And if you have a different password for every one of your cameras, which is the smart thing to do, but if you've got a 100, 200 camera system, that can get cumbersome too. So passwords tend to just not get changed. And if they do, they get changed once, and then any number of installers, guards, supervisors all have the passwords for the cameras in case something goes wrong so that they can put a new one up. And so the password doesn't get changed. Wireless cameras that we talked about, they sit on the very edge of your site, right? So an outdoor wireless camera, the silos that I put mine on, I was pretty protected because there wasn't great wireless at that site because it was thousands of acres, right? And before you could get close enough to a wireless signal, you needed to be inside. We would have caught you by the time you got there with any luck. But wireless cameras sitting on the outside of your building are a gateway and a pathway to your data because they're on your network. So the device itself can become a portal to get into your network and into your research data, your manufacturing, your sales data, your customer information. Firmware and patches. Cameras today are IoT devices, as we talked about last week, right? They're Internet of Things devices. And how many times do you fire up your laptop or your cell phone and it says you have an update? You're now going to iOS, 13.3, 13.4 will be tomorrow. Every night on my work computer, I leave it running, and at 2 a.m., there are updates. My cable box will update with the latest firmware and updates every night at 3 a.m. It wakes me up because there's a little light that flashes on it. I'm a light sleeper. So firmware and patches come in all the time. If you use a NetVR, then you are responsible for sending those patches and firmware to cameras, and it could be a full-time job. If you put the device onto the cloud, those patches and firmware updates get pushed down when they're available on a time schedule that you set up. So at 2 in the morning, when your network is pretty slow, you'll push down patches and firmware updates so all your cameras are properly protected against hackers and other malware, right? Most cameras today don't have current firmware or security patches, and some of them haven't had current firmware and security patches for a decade. I'm very comfortable saying that. I would say most cameras that you see, and although it'd be very hard to prove that, I'm willing to make that comment, and I don't think many people in our field will argue with me on that. But you, as the security manager, are responsible for making sure that whoever is responsible for it. So you may not be the guy who is the cybersecurity expert at your place of employment, but you are responsible for making sure they understand that your cameras are IoT devices and patches and firmware updates need to be taken care of. It's a general cyber hygiene thing when it comes to security devices. You want to make sure that your devices aren't the thing that's letting information out, right? You're trying to keep the bad guys out in the same way you let information out through the same portals, right? Because you didn't protect your devices. So make sure that you understand the security requirements. And again, if you go with the onboard recording to a cloud, then the people that you buy your cameras from and you basically rent your cloud space from, make sure they include cyber hygiene and they're downloading all of those things to your cameras. So device security is a huge thing. It's only getting even more structured and more important. There are a number of companies that are making a cottage industry out of coming to guys like me and saying, how do we put a program in place for you so that we can make sure your cameras are protected? But you're responsible as a security manager, and just know that passwords don't get changed. Wireless cameras are a portal. Firmware and patches on the cameras. When you get to your first place of employment, you ask when was the last firmware update on the cameras. You are probably going to hear crickets and see tumbleweeds. It probably didn't happen, and now that's just become your responsibility. So, takeaways. Task and purpose are the drivers when it comes to cameras. If you don't have a task and you don't have a purpose, then you shouldn't have a camera. Just saying, oh, we need cameras for security and putting cameras around your perimeter doesn't do anything for you if you don't know what you're supposed to be looking at and why you're looking at it. And so many people in security will just put up cameras for cameras' sake. Don't be that guy or that girl. You pick the camera based on the practical criteria we talked about, the environment, the power source, the transmission source. All those things will help you pick the best camera. With that, when you turn in your final on the cameras, with the cameras on it, right? You already did some of the pre-work with the alarms and the locks and things. Your final will be that same type of exercise, but with the cameras on it. You may have different cameras, and you certainly will have different camera locations than your classmates. That's okay. As long as you have a task and purpose, and you pick the camera based on the things that you know about that environment and the lighting and all of those things that we talked about, then you just have a different camera in a different place, but you're accomplishing the same goal. You'll be okay. The camera power and transmission source matter. How you're going to power that camera really does matter, because you want to make sure that power is there. And then how you're going to transmit it, be it wireless or wired, really does matter, and you need to make that decision. And you need to make it based on the availability and what you're willing to give up and whether or not you're going to protect those wireless cameras. The right mount, it really sounds, you look at it and you say, well, once I've got the right camera and I know what I'm going to do and everything, the technology is what matters. Not if you don't use it right. And the mount is probably the most important thing when it comes to a camera, as far as whether you're going to get out of it what you think you're going to get out of it. Because poorly mounted cameras will be nothing but an expense to you. And if you don't worry about the cost of ownership, if you don't think about that ahead of time, it will come back to bite you. Recorders, easy. Two choices. The tested and trusty, right? The NVR. It's been around forever. It does work. Hey, look, there's no problem with you selecting that if that's what you want to do. Then there's the slick and the cheaper, which is the onboard recording, sending your images to the cloud. You don't have to worry about failures. That's really taken care of in the cloud or on the camera itself. And those, SD cards have been around forever. So really, it's just your choice. Again, there's not a wrong answer. So whichever one you decide to do, you just need to tell me why you decided on that one. Remember that the security of devices, the information cyber hygiene of those devices is your responsibility. Have a plan. When you hit your first job, one of the things that's going to impress people the most and make friends with the IT department, which you're going to want to do, is when you go to them and say, I've got all these IoT devices, I don't know what the status is on updates, firmware protections, I need your help, because you will need their help. They will absolutely love you because they understand what they're trying to protect and that you're trying to close up vulnerabilities as well. So we're coming to the end here. So there's no reading this week. If you noticed, I didn't assign any reading this week. I think the lecture was enough. There's probably some things in the books about mounts and things, but those things change, and I just preferred to go with it in straight lecture this week. And that's done. You have a quiz. That's due Sunday at 11:59 p.m. As you know, our course is running on normal schedules, so there's no extensions. With that said, there's going to be a lot of people on the SRU network, and there's more and more people across the world who are working from home, and we're already starting to see pockets of things breaking down a little bit or slowing down a little bit. If you have connectivity issues, we're all in different places now, right? You may have gone back to your apartment in Slippery Rock, but more than likely your home of record, and you're working from there. If you have connectivity issues, call me and let me know that. I can work with you on that, but I need to know. I can't, I can't help you if the quiz is due Sunday at midnight and you go on 10 minutes before and you can't get on because the internet's not working right because there's 1,000 people streaming Netflix in your neighborhood. I can't help you with that. So you need to test this stuff out early. This is the best thing to do. A suggestion for you, purely a suggestion. Early afternoon is a great time for connectivity generally in this environment. People are going to be working from home. They're going to be using up a lot of bandwidth during the day. And at night, everybody streams Netflix and Hulu and Prime Video, and they surf the internet. They do the things that they do for recreation, and since they can't get out, they'll be doing more of that. There's going to be more power watching and binge watching than we've ever seen before. But there is a slight break between, say, 2 and 6 in the afternoon. I would strongly suggest that if you wanted to set up a schedule, which you're going to need to do if you're doing all online classes now, that's a suggestion. You don't have to do it. Work when you think it's going to work, and if you've got great internet, I mean, power to you. Work middle of the night or first thing in the morning, whatever floats your boat, right? But I will tell you that if you're looking for a sweet spot that I've learned from working at home, fix that. 2 to 4 in the afternoon, or 2 to 6 rather, before dinner and late in the day. Most people who work from home, if they're going to work on any documents or things like that, they'll do that offline, or they won't be uploading copies. They'll be working on plans and things like that in the afternoon. There'll be less Zoom calls and things like that going on. So give that a try if you think it helps. Be well, be responsible. I will tell you that I have not been feeling well, and I am quarantined in my home. CDC recommendations are that I not be tested because I don't have severe symptoms. And although I am older than the hills, I am not in the age group that would require testing. So I'm home. My daughter is dousing the place in disinfectant. I think she thinks it's mace, and she's shooting the germs individually. She's walking around with this bottle all the time, just shooting at everything. I think my respiratory issues are half a virus and half breathing in Lysol. But I have all the symptoms of this COVID thing, and it's not fun. But look, it's I have a relatively mild case. Same time, I watch the videos of people on the beaches of Florida. Drinking margaritas out of a single straw, and it just makes me shake my head because no one is immune to this. First reports of it doesn't affect people of student age, and it doesn't affect children. Those reports are starting to be disproven. The plurality of newly identified positive people with this virus are between the ages of 18 and 49. More so than the older generation. And as of today, in my own home state of Michigan, we have one 1-year-old and one 9-year-old, I believe, that have tested positive. So it is not as age specific as once thought. So please be responsible. If you don't know what a COVIDia is, I'll put the definition up for you, and I would hope that you would spread that definition out to people because it will help them to understand how I and hopefully you feel about irresponsible behaviors. Your career in protective services starts now because we're in the middle of a crisis. So do the right thing and convince others to do the right thing. Have a great week. If you need me, I'm sequestered here in my home, so reach out to me, and if I'm not asleep, I will absolutely answer you as quickly as possible. Have a great week.